Okay, thanks everybody for coming today. So the purpose of our presentation today is to just introduce you to a few different types of projects that some of the scholars that have gone through the Nixon Scholars Program at Mount Royal have done over the last couple of years. So I picked a range of types of projects that we're going to talk about today. And so one of the goals is to get some information out about the range of types of projects that people can do, and also to have some discussion towards the end of this session for anybody who's thinking about submitting an application to the Nixon program. If you have questions about what might fit or not, or you want some help in developing an application in terms of what question you want to ask, or maybe developing a little bit of a proposal, we can talk about your questions today as well. So maybe we'll start with introductions. My name's Janice Miller-Young, and as of last July, I'm the director for the Institute for the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. And I've been involved with the Nixon program over the last almost every year since it started. I was a scholar in the first year in 2009, and I've facilitated a couple cohorts of scholars since then.
And I am Melanie Rathburn, and I'm in the Department of General Education. I'm also cross-appointed with biology, so I'm a scientist is my background. I was in the 2010 Nixon Scholars Program, and still finishing up kind of my work with that. And I've done a few other different scholarship of teaching and learning projects since that first initial endeavor.
I'm Glenn Ryland, and I'm also in the Department of General Education, and I also have some role with the University Entrance Option Program on campus. And I'm part of the 2011 group. I guess it feels like 12 because I actually took a year off trying to wrap up my dissertation because I had too many other things going on. And then I've got back to my project now recently in the last few months. Yeah, I think that's it.
I'm Margie McMillan. I'm in the library. I have been involved in SoTL since 2008, before we called it that, and was in the 2012 Nixon Scholars cohort, and have done a few little projects since then that are feeding off that.
I'm April McGraw. I'm in the psychology department, and I started doing some SoTL work when I was in grad school. I'm also part of the same cohort as Margie in 2012, and have done continuing to do SoTL work as I'm also finishing that project up.
So everybody's going to take a couple of minutes to talk about their own project, but before we start, I was just going to do just kind of a survey of types of questions that one might ask in SoTL. And I decided to use Pat Hutchings' taxonomy of SoTL questions, which actually I don't really like because it's very simple. So she breaks it down. You have on your handout 4 different types of questions. But as I thought about preparing for this presentation, I thought, well, simple is good for today. We don't have to get into a whole bunch of different qualitative research paradigms or mixed methods or anything like that. So I actually do like the taxonomy just as an introduction of types of questions. She breaks it down into actually 3 main ones, and the 4th is kind of a newer type of question. So the what works question is the first one on the table, and this is maybe the more traditional kind of discovery or quantitative research paradigm that some people might be familiar with. So the idea is these are questions about whether something is making an impact in the classroom and trying to compare maybe a new intervention or a new pedagogy to something else to see if there's an actual difference. So some people have done that, and April's going to talk about that, and I know a few others who have done quantitative types of experimental or quasi-experimental studies. But I just put a note on here because I think a lot of people expect that that's what they have to do when they first start in SoTL, and certainly they don't have to. And if they really want to, just to be aware that it can be difficult to do, because if you're trying to do an experimental paradigm where you're controlling and manipulating variables and you're working with classrooms that students are self-selecting into, it's difficult to set up a controlled kind of a design. So if you really wanted to do that, you might want to consider maybe a bit more of a long-term study where you systematically make some changes over a longer period of time to assess whether something is changing in your classroom, as opposed to splitting your classroom into 2 halves and doing one thing to one half and something else to the other half, with which the ethics board isn't going to let you do anyway, most likely. So just to put that out there. Second type of question is more of a descriptive question. So what is happening? More of a in-depth analysis to describe what kind of process students are going through when they're learning a new concept, or what they're experiencing when they're out in the field or in practicum. So much more descriptive, and not necessarily any less rigorous than an experimental study. It can still be rigorous in many ways, but just trying to look at student learning from a completely different paradigm, not necessarily trying to make analysis of the impact of something, but to deeply understand what is happening in a certain situation. Third is what is possible. So these are types of questions where we have some goals for our classes, what's happening in our classrooms, and maybe we haven't met them yet, but we're continuing to try and assess our progress along the way. So one of the studies that has gone through the Nexon program, which is not going to be discussed today, but is on the table, is one that Jody Nickel did from education. So she was trying to develop a feedback system for students when they're writing their reflections, to help them more deeply reflect on their learning as they went through a certain course. And so again, she didn't really assess the impact because she wasn't comparing what the students did to any control group, but she's continuing to work on this over time to try to improve students' ability to reflect and write their reflections. The last one in the taxonomy is theory building, which you'll notice is blank in the table because I don't think anyone at Mount Royal has gone that far yet. Maybe that's a goal for the future, but that would be a grounded theory type of study where instead of testing a theory, the goal of the study would be to build some kind of new theory about understanding student learning or understanding something that was happening in the classroom. So that's just kind of a brief introduction. This is a table that I hope to build up over time and add more resources to. Just so you know, the underlined blue text are actually hyperlinks, so if you're interested, I can send you the digital document after this, and you can go and look at some of the descriptions of these studies, which are all ones that have come out of the Nexon program in the last couple of years.